Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
Hello, everybody. This week rocks because we've done a couple episodes on the single tax, but this week we are doing the double tax, honey. It's all about how women of color are overcharged and underpaid. And I have the brilliant Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman with me today. Hi.
Hello, how are you? I'm so excited to be here.
I know it's going to be very fun. So I'm excited to just go deeper with everybody. But before we
Yes.
do that, let me tell you about Anna. So Anna is an award-winning Ghanaian American researcher and writer. She is a post-grad student at Harvard Kennedy School studying public policy and economics. She is the youngest recipient for a CEDAW Women's Rights Awards by the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Her first book, The Black Agenda, Bold Solutions for a Broken System, received widespread coverage from outlets like NPR, Essence, Telemundo, and the New York Times. And now she has the brilliant The Double Tax. So 2 books, and you're so young. How does she do it?
Well, shout out to my wonderful team, which is also young, quite frankly. They are, I would say, the magicians in the background, but they're also just extremely competent young people who I feel like betting on young folks is always a good bet. And so I'm so excited to have those people in my corner. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm very impressed because I know I'm writing a book and it's been years in the making. And so I know what a lift that is. So to have two big books that have made, splashes culturally, it's very impressive.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's get everyone on the same page. How do
Yes.
you define the double tax?
Yes, so first and foremost, thank you so much, Denise, for having me. I'm grateful to just have platforms to talk about this. I think that especially for women, it's important for us to normalize these conversations around costs. One thing that I discovered when we were writing this book is that women don't really talk about how expensive it is to be a woman. I feel like it's a little taboo. So I'm so excited that we're having conversations about the single tax, the double tax, the pink tax. We should be normalizing these conversations. So super excited to be here. When we talk about the double tax, I like to say it's the pink tax and then some, right? So it's really this compounded cost of sexism and racism. And I would argue that there's a little bit of classism also sprinkled in there as well. And it's just this idea that when things are expensive for women, especially women of color, and those costs go unaddressed, they become societal costs for everyone else. And so a great example of this that's happening right now is, I'll say it like this. I don't know if y'all remember when Colbert was basically told that he was going to be fired from his show.
Who could forget?
Who could forget, right? I would argue that the demise of the Colbert Show actually began with Jamel Hill at ESPN several years prior, and once again was marked by Samantha Bee and also Amber Ruffin. Notice I only mentioned women in the last 2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
My point there is that had we not had the uproar that we had for Colbert back when those women were being pulled off air, perhaps Colbert would still have his job, right? So I think that that's what I mean by these societal costs that are eventually incurred by other groups that may have thought, oh, those are things that are happening to women and women of color over there. They're not really my problem to begin with.
That's such a great point. And I think we all have to remember that as the times we are living in right now, as people that you might think you're not going to be vulnerable. The reality is we are all vulnerable if we allow anyone's humanity to be overlooked.
Exactly. We're all on the menu.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly. So I want to start with talking about the cost of the beauty standard, which I think this is a really important distinction. And I felt there was a lot of pushback on our single tax episode when we talked about the cost of being a single woman, and the largely, I'm going to generalize, but largely male response was this idea that, oh, we'll just buy the gray razor. And I was like, I think we're missing what we're really talking about. The problem is, right, we live in a world where we all adhere to patriarchal beauty standards. And when you adhere to those standards, you make more money. And so there is a
Right.
direct correlation between your wealth and how you show up in society. And when you are not the dominant beauty standard and you then have to conform to these systems, there is not only a personal cost, but there is also a financial cost. And so I would love you to talk about why this is critical and woefully misunderstood.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I had a conversation today with one of my guy friends, and we were talking a little bit about professional wins. So I'm applying for like a fellowship right now, and he was asking me like, how are you navigating kind of like getting ready for the job market, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, it's crazy. There's an actual paper out. I don't know if it's published yet, but I know it's a working paper at least, where what they show is that there's a return to looking attractive on the economics job market. So the more attractive you are, the higher your placement is kind of, I think, what the main finding is, or at least you do better on the market. And I was telling him, like, I think that, as a guy, you can say, I don't really care. But for women, there's a real penalty to not investing in our appearance. And I think that there's no other place that you can see this than Love Island. Love Island is, in my opinion, a microcosm of what our society is experiencing when it comes to desirability. And I should note here that it's interesting to me, by the way, that there's only one white woman left, by the way, on the show. We can talk about that later. But my point here is that if you actually watch the show and you watch the commentary around it, the amount of vitriol that these women get for their appearance actually perfectly illustrates the double tax. So in general, the women are more critiqued on their appearance than the men. That's where we see the pink tax really rearing its ugly head. This idea that women are having to spend more money just to exist. And a lot of times it shows up in the products that we use to upkeep our appearance. I like to call this the cost of presentability, right? And so the idea here is that the women are spending more time. You literally see this on the show. They got the whole makeup gamut. They can't just be going out there like barefaced, not usually, right?
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, if you're a black woman or if you're close to a black woman's identity, let's say you're like Kata, who's biracial, there's now this additional tax you have to worry about when it comes to your hair. I've been debating whether or not I have the time to write the op-ed on this, but it's actually a perfect illustration where you now see a separate discourse altogether happening around these black women's hairstyles. More specifically, Anaya, as well as Trinity. Mind you, these are the two darkest women on the show, right? So in this, I like to say that the double tax can't really be ignored by women, especially black women, because there are real financial penalties and societal penalties to not actually investing in those things as part of your identity. And I think that that really resonates in the real world outside of the Love Island universe, where you see this actually play a role in whether or not people get jobs, or whether or not they're even able to remain in the classroom. People say your hair is distracting. Why are you having your fro out? Why are you having your braids out? And suddenly you're being written up for citations that you didn't even know existed. And so that's why things like the Crown Act, which make it hard for you to discriminate on the basis of hair, are so important. It's not only about addressing the things that maybe your Trinities and your Anayas will deal with, but also if Kenzie decides that she wants to switch up her hair and that might not be in conjunction with the workplace, she's also going to be protected in that as well.
Yeah, and I think what people don't realize is that when we created this like idea of what is presentable or professional, it was rooted in white supremacy and patriarchy. And so we have to like take a step back and look at the myths we ingested, right? Like, why do we think that is the only thing that looks professional? Like, what does that even mean? And that's where I'm like, we've all been told a story, and the opportunity now is to readdress that story, renegotiate that story so that it works for more people. And so that's one of the big things I want people to ask themselves those questions when they're feeling resistance. You know, natural hair is now more accepted in the workplace.
Right.
But 20 years ago, you were very alienated. It was very unacceptable for black women to show up with natural hair. And so they had to conform.
That's right. And let me just add another layer to this, because I love what you just said there. A show that I recommend people check out is Mad Men. If you're trying to understand some of the things that are happening in society right now, I would say there's two shows, Mad Men and Succession. Those two things, pretty much about the same demographic of people. You might be wondering, which demographic? White men, right? So when we talk about patriarchal and racist standards, a lot of this just boils down to, what do white men prefer?
Yeah.
right? And I should really be more specific. What do they prefer publicly?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they do prefer black women or brown women privately, but it's a certain version of it, right? It's a more distorted or warped version of that. And I think to your point about, the hair politics of it all, there's also like a separate conversation that we're not even having right now about blondness.
Yeah.
And how that also affects white women, right?
Yeah.
This idea of if you're a ginger, you're actually ostracized, and how that kind of comes up. And I mean, talking to folks who are redheads, it seems to be, it's a real thing,
Yeah.
right? And so again, there's these layers of like, your proximity to the most marginalized, how does that affect the sort of cost that you incur when it comes to beauty? And a lot of it just boils down to the actual price you're paying to conform to whatever beauty standard you can get closest to, and whether or not that beauty standard even holds up and stands the test of time.
Yeah. And then beyond just like the societal cost, right? There's the
Literally.
literal cost.
There's a literal cost.
And what I loved about your book is just how beautifully you lay out the data. That once you see it, you can't unsee what you've seen. It's like that kind of thing where you're like, I see all the numbers and you're like, this is worse than I imagined. I knew it was bad, but it is far starker than I think most of us even realize. And so I appreciate you laying it out for us so we can really see the differential and like how far we really have to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say that, I can't remember the numbers exactly in my head, but I can tell you sort of the differentials.
Yeah, great.
What I can say is that women are definitely spending more on getting their hair done and beauty upkeep as compared to men. It's like thousands of dollars more, right? And a lot of that, again, like we were saying, is driven by the societal pressure to be presentable. And the return to being presentable is seemingly higher for women than it is for men. But then for black women, if we just take it to the hair alone, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain this to people, but like there is both a time cost and there is a literal cost for your hair.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm getting braids, right? Braids typically will take, I want to say on a good day, 5 hours.
Yeah, it was like even longer. I'm like 8 hours.
8 hours usually, right? If they're really taking their time, especially if you got like an auntie with kids, like she's going to go and take care of the kid, come back, she's got to rest. And then now, because of inflation, because of tariffs, all of these other additional things that are playing a role into the literal cost of the beauty products and the hair products, they're now going to start charging you $350, $400. This is not including tip.
Yeah.
So I'm now being expected to have fresh braids throughout the year, which means I have to get my hair done probably 5 to 6 times a year, right? And that means already I'm spending $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention that we just talked about the amount of time that I'm going to be just sitting in the chair. I don't think people realize this, but back in the day, remote work wasn't a thing. So you couldn't just be like, I'm going to work simultaneously, get my hair done. You have to take the day off.
Yeah.
You have to maybe sacrifice the time that you do have to rest from work to go get your hair done. And so there's this other cost that you're having to deal with that is on top of just the straight up beauty maintenance that every woman is dealing with, that if you don't incur that cost, it could be your job on Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. And then scarcity of product, right? We obviously don't live in a fair beauty universe. So it's only in the past decade we've seen a rise in Black-owned brands that are for Black women. And so now we have more options. But, 10 years ago, you're driving wherever you can go to try and find the product. That's time. Yes. And then that's a scarce product. So chances are it's more expensive because it's not, as mainstream. And I don't mean mainstream, but you know what I mean? Like as readily available.
That's exactly right. Yeah. This is a supply and demand problem, right?
Yeah.
So the idea here is that you have not only Black women, I don't know if you remember that one trend with Mael Organics where white women are also buying these products, right? So you have all of this demand that's taking place, limited supply because the folks who are giving money to the Black-owned companies don't actually think they're going to sell.
Yeah.
So they're going to underinvest, which lowers supply, but then there's clearly high demand, right? Because I think Black folks, we contribute around $7 billion towards this industry, right? High demand, low supply, inflates the price. Not only that, but like you just said, I go ahead and I drive to my local CVS. Maybe we get a half a shelf space.
Yeah.
So now all the Black people are trying to get the same stuff. You're not stocking up. And so now I'm willing to pay $30 more to get the product that only works on my hair because the Garnier is not doing what it needs to do.
Yeah.
It's all of these additional costs just to look presentable, and really presentable by somebody else's standards.
Yeah. And I think what I want people to also understand is, like, we don't have numbers to the cost associated to the time, but there is, in the same way that we've quantified unpaid labor, right? If the unpaid labor market was
lost
paid,
wages,
yeah,
literally.
there's a number there that we don't have currently, but there is an immense amount of time lost that if we figured out how to do this better, we could reinvest that time into something else, and that's better for the economy. So that's the piece that I think is the most important for people to understand. Like, time is our most finite resource.
That's right.
And we're asking a lot of women to freely give away their time for the most finite resource to adhere to a beauty standard they did not create.
Clock it. And I would say what you're talking about also maps on really nicely to caregiving and childcare. When I tell you, I don't think any chapter has radicalized me more than writing about how expensive motherhood and caregiving is. Like, from a time perspective, but also from a literal cost by cost breakdown. I remember when I wrote that chapter, because so basically, just to give people an overview, the way the book is set up is I'm looking at the lifetime of a woman, and there are some key moments that usually will arise in a lifetime of a woman. Maybe you encounter beauty standards for the first time, so you start thinking about yourself through a lens of what looks presentable, what looks trendy, etc. But then I also look at your career, wins, right? Thinking about your first check, your first salary, your first promotion, even the first career choice that you decide to make. But then I'm also looking at sort of these middle-aged wins or milestones. So thinking about motherhood, caregiving, retirement, buying your first home, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember writing that chapter about child care. It was the hardest chapter to stop writing.
Ooh.
I just wanted to keep writing, but I was like, the book is not about child care.
Right.
But like, I remember writing the chapter, looking at the numbers. And for those who don't know, I think the average cost of childcare, at least in 2019, was around $500, something around that. It's probably higher now because of inflation, right? And I remember calling my parents and being like, one in a possible. And I'm talking about kids.
Yeah.
One in a possible, because I know I could probably raise one kid successfully. You asking me for more than one, I need you to give me a down payment.
Yeah.
Because it is really almost $300,000.
Yep.
To get a kid from 0 to 18. And we were talking about, I want to say, like 2021 numbers. It's not 2025 or 2026 numbers anymore, excuse me.
Yeah.
And I also think that from a time perspective, there is this expectation that when we were talking to women, they were like, people just expect us to take care of everybody.
Yep.
There is never actually really a conversation.
Yep.
And so this tax on your time is just incurred through your gender identity. And I think that is something we need to have an interrogative. I know I just made that up, but like, we need to interrogate that, because why are we just assuming that women have endless time when we just established that just one part of our life takes all this time away from our day?
We're living in this time where the reason I did the single tax episode was not because I, listen, I'm single. That's nothing to do with it. Everyone's like, oh, you're just complaining. I was like, no, it's because the demographics are changing. Because what's happening is having a child is getting so expensive that people are opting out of having children. And so we have to talk about it. We have to look at it and say, why is that happening? And if tax incentives to have children is not enough, then, because it's not, like, based on the current data and market.
Right.
So then if you want people to keep reproducing and have society, what are the solutions? What do we actually do to make it more enticing for people to decide they want to have kids? And so a lot of it is what we're talking about. The cost of childcare is too much. Women are automatic caregivers. Like, if you look at a family and I was just watching like a movie, and it was the woman automatically took on the caregiving role instead of her two brothers. Why is it always assumed that the woman will be the caretaker? And obviously that's, like, in large part a generalization. I know plenty of male caretakers, but the point is we're looking at that as a societal thing that we expect. And so I can see why many women are opting out, because the quality of my life diminishes. Yes, having a child is a beautiful thing, but if it's going to come at the expense of I have no life, then is it worth it?
Listen, I need to be careful about what I'm going to say, because I respect mothers so
deeply.
much.
It's the hardest job in the entire world.
Deeply. But guys, the data is not in your favor, right? We know that moms are less likely to get promoted, more likely to get paid less, and also less likely to get hired, simply because they're moms.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that the reality is, there's an op-ed that I hope to write one day, but I like to say that society hates moms, but loves motherhood.
Yeah.
Right? And when we talk about what's currently happening in our current political climate, the push for motherhood is very specific.
Yeah.
Actually, right? They're saying they want more moms, but what they really want are more white moms.
Yeah.
Having white babies.
Yep.
Specifically.
Yep.
Right? And a lot of that comes from, a fear of white people being replaced, the changing demographics, as you noted. And, I find it very ironic considering that just 50, 60 years ago, we had Ronald Reagan demonizing mothers.
Yeah.
Except they were of a different race.
Yeah.
Right? That's the welfare queen trope.
Yep.
That was popularized in the 1980s. And so everything you're saying is so real and it's so true, because I remember when I was really crunching the numbers around childcare, and more so even before childcare, childbearing. This idea of, I didn't know ultrasounds cost money.
I know.
What? Literally just asking people, hey, do I even have somebody in my stomach? Costs money.
Yep.
Prenatal care costs money, right? You get in the ambulance, if you got the emergency, costs money. The baby costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have the baby, they charging the baby.
Yeah, exactly.
They're charging everybody in the process. Now, granted, this is very specific to the U.S., but even then, like, going beyond just the childbearing process, child rearing everywhere costs money. The motherhood penalty is a very real thing. This society that we live in globally punishes mothers for having kids, but then simultaneously tells women, go have kids, that your purpose lies in motherhood. So the question that I have to ask now is, well, you're telling me this thing that I should do is undervalued, but you're telling me to do the undervalued thing. Do you want me to be undervalued?
Yeah.
That's the natural conclusion that I have to make. And so I think when we talk about solutions, we have to fundamentally change the system. And what I've been telling people, especially, is with caregiving, which extends to elder care, child care, and even at times just taking care of someone with a disability, this is either going to be an economic crisis or an economic opportunity. We have to choose one. There is actually no, and I think that a lot of people are just like, oh, things are just going to like work out. And it's like, well, no, not really, because unfortunately for you and for me, the generation of boomers is about to retire. I'm talking in a year or two. So the question we should be asking is, who's taking care of those people?
Yeah.
And how do they take care of those people and still contribute towards taxable income?
Yeah.
That we can then take taxes from and invest in our communities. How is that going to do the math for me? Because right now, 1 + 1 is not 7.
And I live in Los Angeles, and to have a family here, a kid here, to even like just get by, they're saying you need a minimum of $350,000. And so you're like, well, okay, let's break down salaries. Like if you go on a job board, I'm going on job boards, okay? I'm taking a little look. You have senior producer positions in Los Angeles offering you $150,000. So yes, maybe if you have dual income and you both generate, maybe you can get by. But I'm sitting here and a majority of the salaries are not equating to the cost. So we're living in this really big gap where you're like, you can't expect people to sign up to have kids and then not be properly compensated in the cities they live in. So the disconnect comes from, you got to increase wages. You want people to have kids. You need to pay people more. And why aren't we paying people more? Because we are so concerned with quarterly profit. And the thing is, money's not a finite amount. It's not a finite thing. There's enough money in the world to make everyone can eat tomorrow if we decided that's what we wanted to do. And so I look at it and I'm like, the opportunity is to figure out how to make sure people have enough.
Let me tell you something. What you just described is my politics. My politics is sharing. I like to share. Very simple.
I'm running for office on sharing. Like,
you know what I'm saying?
That's it.
Hoard for what?
We
why?
learned it in kindergarten.
This is like ABC 1, 2, 3, very basic Abbott Elementary. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about? I think for me, it's just like, why don't you want to share? You as a human being do not need $1 billion. I really do believe that fundamentally. You don't need it. You're buying all the properties in the world for what? You can only live in one place at one time, drive one car at one time, use one phone at one time. What are we talking about here? Right? And so I think this question of like, I always say, I feel like a lot of the problems that we're dealing with is because people are greedy.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. People are greedy. And I think to your point about child tax credits, that is a really great policy. You need to up it
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah.
It has to adjust with inflation. It can't be that we're giving people $2,000 and then away. Like, clearly that's only covering rent. And I think that what was really interesting was when we were talking to women, especially the women that I highlight in the book, it was clear that this is a second mortgage.
Yeah, it is.
Now, if you can't afford a mortgage in the first place, what you mean it's a second mortgage?
Yeah.
Huh? What are we talking about? I think a lot about how my upbringing is so, only by the grace of God, quite frankly. Because I think a lot about how my mom and my mom revealed to me maybe, I want to say a couple months ago, that the first 9 years of my life, we had no health insurance.
Yeah.
Which now is like, this makes perfect sense because every time I had an ear infection, where did we go? The ER. So I was like, why are we going to the ER? Now I understand why that was the case, right? I was a Head Start kid. Head Start is free childcare, right? When I got the full scholarship to my private school, they paid for aftercare and they paid for before care. All my parents had to do was drop me off in one place and pray that I was taken. That was literally it. But I thought to myself, they literally couldn't have afforded anything else. There was nothing else. Like, maybe my siblings had to go to school. So it was like, who would have taken care of me had they not had these generous, sometimes public options?
Yeah.
So I remember when they were talking about, we're going to defund Head Start, and I said, huh?
Yeah.
What do you mean? This is like the only, or one of the only options that ensures that the kids that you want us to have are taken care of. But it's clear to me that there's a subset of kids that they want taken care of.
Right.
And there's a subset of kids that they don't really care
quite
a bit about. Yeah.
Well, there's such a disconnect between how are people really living their lives and how the government thinks we're living them.
That's right.
And then it's also like, we're moving in this society where everything is about innovation and moving fast, and yet we have a government that is really behind the current needs of the population. I'm always like, okay, the demographics are shifting. Why am I calling this out? Why are you not calling this out? We have to move with the culture. And the problem is, obviously, we're in this time period where they're fighting to hold a very old story that no matter what they do, it's irrelevant. By 2050, we are more people of color than white people. So it's like, get on the train or get off the train. But I understand this moment. But beyond this moment, I'm also like, something's got to develop in the government structure because it's just not meeting the current needs of people fast enough.
I would say a lot of structures of power are just failing.
And
that's how I know. You know how I know this is not going to last? This is how I know. They're pulling from 1800s playbook. You can't even come up with new ideas of how to conquer and to oppress. That's how I know you guys are about to expire. You know what I'm saying?
So
respectfully,
you can't even innovate on the ideas of how to conquer and oppress.
You can't even. There was a pastor. I'm gonna put quotes on pastor talking about we need to recolonize Africa. Sir, it's not the 16th century and people got guns now. What are we talking about? There are structures in place. You cannot go into Ghana and say we're about to colonize you. The entire Ghanaian army is gonna be on your head. So what are we talking about here? And I think that a lot of it boils down to, I think, the core of what the double tax is arguing, which is that there are people who reject the idea of Black women in particular being free. And by extension, anybody else who's proximate to Black women is suffering as a result. If you're a woman, you're suffering. If you're Black, you're suffering. If you are highly educated, but still economically disadvantaged, you're suffering. If you're economically disadvantaged, you're suffering. If you don't have a home, if you're renting, you're suffering. Everybody who has any sort of proximate identity to Black women are suffering because a group of people, I want to remind people on this podcast, it's a minority. Most people don't care about the demographic change. If you look at Pew Research, most people don't care, or they're like, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Because ultimately people are like, I want a diversity of foods, experiences, and cultures around me. What's wrong with that? The reality of the matter too is, I will say, going back to your changing demographics comment, is that what's really going to happen, and this is what I've been telling people. I said, look, the world is already majority Black and brown. What's happening right now is the West is going through a demographic change.
Yeah.
Everybody's already there.
Yep.
The West is the last to get to the party. And when I tell you they're fighting on for dear life, they're fighting. But let me tell you something about Europe in particular. You can't survive without immigrants. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The way the numbers are set up, your economy will crumble.
America's economy too. I mean, it just makes
Everybody's
0 sense.
economy is going down. Whatever Kesha said about timber is coming down. So the gag of the matter is, like you said, you got to get on the train. You're going to get left. And I think that any organization or any entity or any institution that is really planning and thinking critically about the demographic change that's about to take place is already a decade ahead of everybody else. But of course, you might be wondering, why then are these men moving crazy? I'm going to say something that is a little bit scary, but we should be okay. These men are preparing for apartheid.
Yeah.
What is apartheid? Apartheid says the minority is going to rule over the majority.
Yeah.
That is essentially why we're seeing things with the Supreme Court. We're seeing things with certain judges, certain politicians. It's very much about, we want to codify certain systems, so whatever the demographics are, we will always be in charge. Now, what I like to remind people is that 99 is a bigger number than 1, right?
Yeah.
And so if we decide, hey, we don't mess with that, and we're going to fire you, get you out of here, hold you accountable for that kind of behavior, that's all it really takes. But we all have to be on the same page. And unfortunately, there are some people who think that they're going to bear some fruit from people optimizing for themselves, and others who just don't care enough to actually see something change. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I always think, though, is that the difference between, like, take Hungary, for example.
Yes.
When Viktor Orban came in and took over Hungary, it was a smaller country that was mostly one ethnicity, right? America has been around for 250 years, and as much as it has always been, a poisoned contract, we have always been a country of immense diversity, and we are big. We are really, really big. Part of the issue right now is we're almost too big, that culturally we are all so different that we have very different ways of experiencing and seeing the world. And so trying to unify such a big population is hard on its own. And so I sit there and I'm like, you can try. Like, those guys can try, but there is no way that it will work, because you have a 250-year history of living with people different than you. Like, my mother's an immigrant. Most people are here because their parent is an immigrant. You're past the point of that story even holding any weight. So that's why they're fighting so hard, and that's why it's like what it is, because any power that is wielded by force is unsustainable.
You said it, not me.
So I look at it and I'm like, power that is actually sustainable is not grounded in this idea of force. And when you look at the science of power, it's like no one retains power that way.
I love that, actually. I think if you don't mind me adding to that, I love that. It's grounded in community. Yeah. Because I think, when I think about like the ethnic groups that have survived the test of time, this is arguably like China's story on a number of different fronts. It's like, what keeps you guys together? Right? Because what keeps you guys together is what you can sustain.
Yeah.
And the issue here with what you just talked about is that the whole like MAGA movement is very fractured.
Yeah.
And I think that you can see what sustains America is the diversity, actually, which I think is really emblematic in what we saw with the New York Knicks winning.
Yeah.
Where New York is such a funny city. Like, I love New Yorkers down, but like, there's so many different subcultures and subcultures, and like, people disagree and people don't, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that everybody, even if you didn't watch basketball, you came out the night they won, and it was just like crowds of different people from different walks of life. I don't know. I think that's, to me, that's the core.
Yeah.
At least of the American spirit at its best. And I think that what is happening with what's happening politically is that they're not channeling that, right?
Yeah.
They're channeling the ugliest parts of the history and saying, we want to redo. And everybody's like, we're in 2026.
Yeah.
We don't know why you're stuck over there in the 18th century, 19th century, but like, let us know when you catch up, because this is where we're at. Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with all these companies. I keep being like, you build a product to serve a customer. If you guys forget about your customer, do you think you're still going to have all this money? Like, your wealth is from people being in relationship with you.
Yes.
And we cannot forget about the relational part of commerce. It's a very important piece. And so that's why I'm like, you know, you guys can keep doing whatever you want to do. It is, once again, unsustainable because the thing that got you there was prioritizing people. And once you stop prioritizing people, you will lose it.
Exactly. You know what the best example of that is? Target.
Yep, 100%.
So Target abandons DEI. Turns out, you know, you guys have spent the last decade really, you know what I'm saying? Like courting people on your values. You literally got props for it annually for that, right? Now they've reneged DEI. They won't go back. For whatever reason, they're being very stubborn about it. They can afford to go back.
Yeah.
They don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't go back. Now they've lost the black dollar.
Yeah.
Turns out the black dollar isn't just the black dollar. Black folks have social and cultural capital. So it's not just that people don't want to shop at Target. It's that there's now some shame associated with shopping at Target. So now you got Target out here trying to court every single black celebrity imaginable, trying to tell these black folks, hey, come back and shop with us. Sierra's here.
Yeah.
Jay-Z's here. And it's like, we're not stupid. You know, what are you talking about? But also, that's what you're saying, where it's like this relational aspect is very underrated in places where power is hoarded. And this is actually literally also the problem with the AI movement that's taking place in the tech bros. They're trying to find ways to like be in community with everybody else, to be culturally relevant. And the reality is they're losing the core value, which is relationship.
Yep.
You have separated yourself from society so much so that you are designing products that are literally antithetical to the values of the communities that you're trying to quote unquote serve or at least sell to. And now you're confused why those communities are rejecting you.
And what they don't realize that shame is actually the number one emotion that is hardest to move through. So once you create a human association of shame to something, that customer is 100 times harder to get back than a disappointed customer.
Literally.
Because shame is like, why do you think like that it's the most toxic of emotions? It's the cycle that it's hardest for us to move through. And so this is the thing, when you talk about branding, like we're living in a different world. Like it's not the same marketing and branding that it was in 1980s. Like you have to think differently. And people, if this is how we can show up and resist is with our dollars, then we're going to be thinking about it. It's not like an automatic process. It's not about what's just convenient. It's about everything's expensive now. It keeps going up. So you're being even more thoughtful about how you spend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to pivot us to back to corporate, back to corporate America. I want to get back to the workforce because this always drives me nuts. Like this argument around like the pipeline myth. Like we want to hire diverse, but you know we just don't know where to find them. And I'm always like, how hard are we looking? Like. Also, it's not that hard. I look around and I'm like, it can't be that hard. But I used to have a startup, and so much of when people like were looking for engineers and diverse engineers was just so hard. And I'm like, I don't really think it is. I think there's a level of laziness or limiting beliefs or resistance. You know, I do believe limiting beliefs drive a lot of us, right? So it's like, if you've told yourself a story that it's hard, it's going to be hard. If you tell yourself actually it's abundant and it's all around me, guess what? It's abundant and all around you. And so I want you to break down this pipeline myth for us because once and for all, we're done.
So actually this is my dissertation. So just to kind of give folks some context, I'm a PhD student at Harvard right now. I study public policy and economics. And a lot of my work focuses on thinking about the pipeline and the talent pathway problem, so to speak, in corporate America and beyond. And it's funny. I was reflecting on this recently because I'm applying to this fellowship and I'm talking a little bit about that work. And a lot of corporations are playing Bird Box. I don't know if y'all seen that movie with Sandra Bullock on Netflix.
I've not seen it, but I know the image. Yeah.
You know the image. And it's Bird Box by choice. There's a lot of diverse talent out there. And I know this because I know the demographics of Gen Z.
Yeah.
Gen Z is 1 in 4 Hispanic.
Yeah.
Gen Alpha is majority minority, which is why like when people are like, I don't know where the diverse talent is and what are you talking? Like, I know you're not looking anywhere. You picked 3 or 4 schools and you said, if I don't get my people from there, I'm not even going to entertain the conversation. And I think that you miss out on a lot.
Yeah.
Right? The same brands who say, I don't really want to hire no black folks will then put out a, you know, KFC appreciates black people for Juneteenth with a drumstick. Like, you know, it's giving, you would have avoided that if you had some black employees in your organization. So I think that I'll say this, the business case has been made 1,000,001 times. There's a lot of folks who are hoping that companies will be benevolent and will make the right decisions. I'm in the camp of, I assume that you guys aren't going to do what you need to do. So we need accountability mechanisms in place. And those accountability mechanisms need to hold you to a standard. And if you fail that standard, we need to shame you. And that's where I've sat. And I think a lot of it boils down to even my experiences as a nonprofit leader, where I was literally trying to build out this pipeline from the organization that I was running into these organizations. And you'll just be in these conversations with leaders and they'll be like, yeah, so like the best that we can do is provide connections to, are those jobs, right? Are those jobs? They're not jobs. Okay, then this conversation is in the serious conversation. I think when we talk about the pipeline myth, there's a lot of erroneous beliefs around like who is actually going to do a good job at the job. And a lot of that comes from stereotype thinking. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like, people will make presumptions about you and what you're able to do before they're able to see you do it. So a lot of this looks like, I'll give you an example. If we're looking along the lines of gender, it's like, okay, I see that she's a woman. She is kind of like in her early 20s, but in about 5 years, she might have kids. And that's going to affect her productivity. Therefore, I can justify giving her a lower starting salary, because I know that over time, I'm going to observe that she's going to be less productive anyway. And so I'm going to adjust my pay based off of how productive I think she's going to be. For black folks and for racial minorities even more broadly, it's a little bit more insidious than that, where it's like, I fundamentally believe that black people are less skilled than white people. And I'm going to observe that in time, and therefore that adjusts this racial gap in pay between the white person for the job and the black person for the job. Now, how can you say that me as a black person, I'm going to be less productive than the white person? But more importantly, how can you divorce that from the systems that are affecting us differently, right? There's a system that is going to give this white person the benefit of the doubt and is going to interrogate me every step of the way. So, like, how are you allowing that context to be completely missed from the conversation? And so a lot of the work that I've been doing with my dear friend Emma Rackstraw, now Dr. Emma Rackstraw, has been really thinking a lot about, you guys like to be bigots outside of your house. But we need to keep your bigotry in the bathtub. It can't be leaving your house like that. So how do we ensure that those discriminatory beliefs, even if you have them, don't actually see the light of day, at least not in the workplace? And so the hypothesis that we've been running with is perhaps the identity of the leaders in the organization are making a difference in the ways in which people are being perceived and people are being evaluated. So the first set of work that I've done with Emma that got covered by Forbes, shout out to Forbes, is that we thought about the role of black leaders as disrupting discriminatory beliefs against black workers. This idea of like, I think black workers are fundamentally less productive than their white counterparts. Turns out when you have a black person watching the way that those black workers are being evaluated, suddenly on average, those black workers are perceived as more productive. Hold on. That sounds like an intervention. It also sounds like you are correcting some discriminatory behavior that could harm the black worker down the line, right? Because the idea is if the black worker is perceived as less productive, that will show up in the way that they're interviewed, the way that they maybe get a pay offer, if they get a pay offer, and ultimately whether or not they get promoted. And this ties directly to work that's been done by Elizabeth Linos and co-authors that shows that black women in particular, going back to the double tax, are less likely to be promoted and more likely to turn over in corporate environments. And when it comes back to it, it's because they were labeled as low performers.
The problem is we're also, we'll have to talk about the fact that like to show up in predominantly like a lot of these are white environments, there is code switching that has to happen. There is silent labor. that is happening. And so, and I have found as a white woman in very male environments,
Yes.
that level of sexism, microaggressions I experience, you end up vibrating out. You end up leaving despite being talented, innovative, and successful. And, successful in spite of the system. But after a
That's right.
while, your mental health is like, do I care?
Yes.
And so when you vibrate out, you lose a lot of this brilliant, innovative, sort of leader-centric talent, because a lot of entrepreneurs end up leaving and doing their own thing because they're like, why am I going to stay in an environment that isn't good for me? But then when you have Black women that stay in the system, I guess my question is, because when I've witnessed DEI initiatives in a lot of companies, they're sort of, performative. They're lip service. They're not actually baked into the DNA of the company, right? You cannot see effective results if it is not something that is built from the ground up and lived and breathed all the way through. And so the women that remain in that system, the question I have is like, do they end up conforming to that system, becoming of the school of thought of that system? Because sometimes you have to survive. Are there people that are doing that? And I know people who've done this where they're very good at navigating the system and they're pushing an agenda within the confines of that. But I wonder about the disease is the structure and then people are the symptoms. And so how do we solve for a poisoned structure?
Yeah. I think that this is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
What I'll say right off the bat is there's no silver bullet solution. This has to be attacked at all sides, right? So of course there's people who need to be within the structure, interrogating the structure. But sometimes what ends up happening is that those people become part of the structure. And then you're not able to hold something accountable if you are the thing, right? It's just harder for you to do it because there's a level of reflection and interrogation you need to do of yourself. And a lot of these companies, they don't want to run into legal trouble. They don't want to run into a PR crisis. And so they give every excuse in the book to not, for example, look at their data disaggregated.
Yeah.
This is a very simple ask that I've asked companies to do over the last 5 years. And they're terrified.
Right.
Because they know that once they do that, they're going to have to address whatever the problem is that is unfolding under the data that is being aggregated over POC, women, minorities. You're going to have a conversation about that. You're going to have to get into it. I think the other aspect of it too is that you have the folks who are doing advocacy. Those people are outside of the structure.
Yeah.
And they're advocating for changing conditions within the structure. I would say the folks who kind of teeter between advocacy and the structure itself, unions. I love myself a good union, right? Unions are going to advocate, but they also understand the structure that they're advocating against, which I think is really important. On the other tip, I would say you need researchers, people who are going to, outside of everything, ask a question that interrogates the system itself using an organization as an example of that, right? Or at least trying to simulate organizational behavior as an example of that. I think for the women who remain, the question I have to ask those women is, what is your purpose? If your purpose there is to get the check, but don't come here talking about, I'm trying to mentor women and da-da-da-da. No, you're not.
Yeah.
That's not really what you want to do. And I think the other thing that you have to think about is, even when you say you want to mentor women or bring women into the system, are you bringing into a system that's going to harm them?
Yeah.
Are you going to put the guardrails up to ensure that they don't go through the same thing that you went through? If it was hell for you, why does it have to be hell 2.0 for them?
Right.
It's not necessary, right? So I think a lot of it is about knowledge sharing, information sharing, using your level of privilege, your positionality to make that process easier if you're going to remain in the system and you want other folks to join you. I think it's important to think about the pipeline into the organization. But at the same time, I think we have to also have a little bit of common sense. Like, if the situation is toxic, I don't want to bring more people onto a boat that's sinking. I think that's not a good idea. But perhaps what makes sense is you recognize the toxicity, you come up with something new, or you hop to an organization that is less toxic and you build a pipeline there so that you're not setting people up for failure as well. So I think that those are all different, I don't want to say winds of the same storm, but different cogs in the same machine that help address sort of these structural barriers that exist. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of this is also going to be waiting out some people's leadership.
Well, that's the big piece, right? Because it's if we know statistically DEI helps you make more money. You're more innovative as a company. Like, we have all the data that no one's listening to. You're just like, you could not
They
have
don't care.
more information. So if you want to stay competitive, you need a diverse employee base.
Yeah.
And so then if you see that, oh, I'm seeing that a lot of women and women of color are leaving. Oh, okay. Then maybe I need to readdress something within the structure of my company if people aren't feeling safe enough to be their fullest selves in this environment. You can see it. It's not going to be a surprise to you. But I think at the end of the day, it's like it's in the core interest of the company.
But that goes back to what we were talking about before, where even if it's in the core interest of the company, the belief that those individuals are fundamentally at odds with what you are optimizing for in employees is the problem.
Right.
So I think there was Tressie McMillan Cottom said something a while back, Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom. She said, people don't think black women are rational, and therein lies the problem. So every time we say something, or every time we suggest something, or sometimes we put something forth, I'm not even thinking about what she's saying, because I don't think she has anything of value to say. And now we're wondering, hey, everyone's like, why is the world crashing? A lot of it is because there are certain groups of people that folks in power just do not think have anything of value to add. And now we're learning, well, the world is actually not surrounding you. The world looks more like me.
Yeah.
So maybe like what I have to say is valuable. But I also think that this brings about the question of, why are we allowing a certain minority of individuals to set the value system for the rest of us? That's where I think the systems change is actually going to begin.
Yeah.
A norm shift. Like, wait a minute, you don't even represent the majority of the country, let alone the world. Why are you the one determining whether or not what I'm saying is valuable, or whether or not what I'm saying is a meaningful contribution, when what I'm saying actually reflects the majority of what's taking place? And I think bringing it back to politics just a little bit, people were really shocked to see that Mamdani won his mayoral run. People were equally as shocked to see Wes Moore win his governor run. But if you actually look at the demographics of their city, and in the case of Wes Moore, of their state, very unsurprising to me. I remember talking to Wes Moore right before he ran. He said, I'm running. And I said, ooh, you got it in the bag. He said, how you know? I said, you're a veteran, you're black, you contribute to Baltimore's economy, you have mass appeal. People know you through your book, actually.
Yeah.
In Mamdani's case, I said, that's an attractive young guy who has an appeal with the younger base, has an appeal with the Muslim community in New York City, which is quite large, but also really cares about people. And in a city like New York, where people are really kind of the thesis of the city, that's why people come to New York, he's gonna wipe the floor with whoever is the opponent. And in both cases, that's what we saw. They are reflecting the value systems of the communities that they said that they're going to serve. Whereas you've seen a lot of these older, typically more white men, they don't reflect those value systems. And part of that is because they don't even know the communities that they're serving.
I think that we're in this time where, I mean, this is my grand thesis for the next 10 years, that we can continue to build in this way that now we see is deeply asymmetrical, everyone's suffering for the most part, or we can build something different. And this is really the opportunity. The next 10 years, build your own table. Like, if you're at a job that does not appreciate your unique genius, you need to go find the people that do, because I believe that that exists for everybody. It's just that it's hard. I understand it's hard to do your own thing, and I understand sometimes it's easier to just get a check, but I'm also like, there's so many brilliant people who, like, if they don't see the genius, other people will. We don't have to like be miserable or feel less than just because this system doesn't appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think to kind of close it out, I would say there are 8 billion people in the world. More than that now, I think. I think this idea of like, you can't find your community, you can't find your consumer base, you can't find people who resonate, statistically improbable.
Yeah.
I feel. You can find those people. I always come back to the lady who started making cowboy Carter gear on Etsy and suddenly found a global fan base because everybody was wearing it at the Beyonce concerts. She was just making for her and her friends.
Exactly.
And now she has a successful business. I don't know. I think it's just like, I love the way you frame that, because it really is what people are always like, oh, Ann, why are you so hopeful? Da, 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 da. And I'm like, listen, there's an opportunity here if we want it. And I have a feeling that it's actually the inevitable, where like the old guard, it's an old dog, dying dog hollering on its way out. And the question is, what will be built in its place? And for me, I think that where I find myself, especially as I'm getting ready to finish my PhD, is like, I want to be one of the builders.
Yeah.
And like, how do I build a world that I want to see? And how do I find people who resonate with that? So I'm glad that you have this platform where I think you're also building that, both digitally and hopefully in person.
Well, that's what's
And the
so
hope
fun,
is to
Anna, is that this podcast, everyone's like, why are you so hopeful? I'm like, because I talk to these amazing people who already are doing it. Like, if you think the future is so far off, it is here right now. People are doing
right
it.
now.
We just have to platform them more. We have to give them more juice, and then they will become the dominant story.
Literally.
But it exists. It's not like some airy-fairy idea that, oh, how are we going to do this? I'm like, there's thousands of people already putting their time, energy, and brain to solve for us. And actually, I don't know if you saw this. I wanted to bring this up with you. Did
Yes,
you
please.
see the article with William Darity about what he thought reparations would cost?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay, good. I knew you did. But I thought it was really interesting. I was like, oh, someone finally gave us a number. And
Yeah.
it's
He's
16.
been working on that for a long time.
Well, it's a lot. It's hard to do, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
basically, he figured out it's 40 million Black Americans who have families that were enslaved. And he thinks what is fair is like $400,000 per person. So that's $16 trillion. The minimum sum he believes that he is fair for reparations. And I was like, let's just do the math. Like $16 trillion. Can we just like look at what has been spent this year on like superfluous things? We have it. But the point is, we have it. None of this is hard to
Just
fix.
take the money from the Pentagon. They don't need it. I'll tell you that.
Right, but none of it's hard to fix. We have enough money,
Yeah.
and that's what I really want to drive home is that, like, I know the disparity feels great right now, but
Yeah.
we are so resourced as a globe and a country, and, like, your information
agree.
helps us so much to really figure out how to bridge that divide. So thank you.
Of course, thank you. And I really love that you ended on the note of reparations, because I think that ultimately the way I see reparations is it unlocks a future that I think allows Black people to be free and allows them to have an economic freedom that will spill over into pretty much every other community, right? We know that Black folks, in particular Black Americans, play such an important role in our country. What would happen if all of them were well-resourced, had access to amenities in their neighborhood? I just think that I know people have been talking about abundance in a very different way, but there's an abundance there that is really radically amazing if we really wanted that to be the case. Of course, there are people working against it, of course, but like even some portion of that amount that Dr. Darity came up with would be life-changing for people. It would enable folks to contribute to our society in new and exciting ways, but we have to be willing to dream and hopefully see that dream all the way through. And I think that that's something that's completely within our grasp.
Yeah, and in our lifetime, only 28% of Americans are pro-reparations today, but
Yeah.
I think that with more information and more discussions like this, I think that number can rise. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Denise. I'm so excited.
That was so fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.